All right, guys, thanks everyone for joining. So we're gonna quickly paint the big picture of what the project is about and how we're trying to tackle the coordination for it. So obviously number one priority is evacuation of people that need to be evacuated from unsafe regions. And we're trying to figure out how to prioritize who gets evacuated, which regions are viable for evacuation. We have so many people that want to help. Donating, trying to help and just don't know how. So we're trying to solve for that and provide a very clear coordination and guidance and problem solve for many different aspects of this initiative. So I'm gonna pass down the floor to Stepan, who is gonna be attempting to lead this project from the perspective of creating structure. He prepared a Google Doc for us to walk through. Hopefully it's going to take around 20 minutes, and then we'll have follow-up Q&A session and advice session for any of you to provide your feedback, comments, and additions to it. The assumption is that, again, we're operating on the extreme uncertainty and extreme danger. And I mean it, when we're talking about evacuation, people get killed when they travel. So please put this in mind when thinking through the processes for this, just so everyone understands. And Stepan, please take on the floor. I think you should be able to share the Google Doc on your screen and be able to walk through it. Please confirm that you can. And anyone who wants to open it on their own screen can follow through that, but I just want to make sure he shares it so that people that will be watching this recording have the same experience of going through it. So I'll let you Stepan start, and I'll mute myself. And maybe a quick introduction for you, Stepan, would be helpful. Just 2 sentences, just so people understand how you're going to be leading this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Artur. Apologies, guys, going off camera due to my connection breaking up. One quick word about myself. So my background is in economics and data science, and as of recent couple of years, also entrepreneurships. So that's where my background is. And right now, I'm trying to assist Artur as much as I can in terms of solving the evacuation problem. So hopefully I can help with the problem-solving mindset here, but I don't have formal background in evacuating refugees, as many of us. So open to suggestions. My mindset of when writing this doc was to basically, we're facing this huge problem where we need to move a whole bunch of people from point A, which is dangerous, to point B, which is safe, and there's a whole bunch of problems along the way. So what we need to do is, given that we have a pretty large financial and human resources, at least that's the assumption that I'm going off of here, how do we solve this problem? So my mindset is to break down this problem in a set of smaller problems as much as possible, which can be tackled on an individual level as much as possible by separate teams. Because one of the challenges, of course, here we are facing is lack of information and also coordination. So the doc, I hope that you guys all had a chance to preview it. And I think to drive this effort the best way, we can try to give the answer to the list of questions. And I think we can break down this problem of moving people from point A to point B, is where point A is any city in Ukraine that is not safe right now, or has a risk of not being safe shortly, getting them to the border, and then moving them beyond the border in one of the EU countries which are willing to accept us. So that's the plan. Now, how can we break down this problem into more concrete steps? Also, FYI, can everybody see my screen all right without, is it not too small? I'll try to zoom in a little bit.
It's okay. Yeah, if you can zoom in a little bit, that'd be great.
So we will need. So this is just a list of questions to get our thinking started. There will be lots of other questions that we may not even be aware of at this point, but we need to start our conversation about it. So some of the questions, and I think the most pressing ones, is what to do with people before the border. Because from my limited knowledge, there are lots of NGOs at the border and beyond the border. So I think this is the set of questions that we'll need to solve, which will have the highest value added. Now, I think I'll go through the list of questions. I think the 4 questions that we need to solve before for the leg of journey that takes place before the border is 1, who, from where, and when do we evacuate? How do we find people who need evacuation? How do we organize them, etc., etc. 2, where do we bring these people? So we got them, on some sort of a bus. Where is this bus driving? Once they reach a destination, what's the plan next? It's pretty easy to end up in a city where you have no contacts and you don't know what to do. It's not a great situation, especially if the city is also being bombarded and it's only marginally safe on the way to the west. Now, 3rd question: which route are drivers gonna take to bring them there? So from my understanding, this is going to be a huge issue in the coming time, as the army movements are, they're difficult to predict and monitor, and this is a factor that we definitely have to answer. Also to build confidence in our efforts. 4, who is bringing them there and using what vehicles? So this is probably the biggest, the largest, the nastiest question that we have to answer. Perhaps you have heard from Arthur, but so far we had 15,000 requests for evacuation, but only 500 volunteers who are willing or able to evacuate people. So this is probably the nastiest one, but we also need to solve all of these 4 questions at the same time to be able to drive these efforts. There are probably more questions, and please add them to the doc or make a note of them and let's discuss them further. As I think there are some notes also, how do we do this safely so that people are not getting exploited? And how do we prevent bad actors, Russian trolls disrupting our efforts or putting people in danger? Those are also questions that we'll need to work through. To go deeper into these questions, I think what we need to do is to break down this problem in a set of very concrete tasks that purely from the point, and yes, thank you, there's a comment also how we get fuel for that ride, of course. So this list is by no means complete and we'll face more questions. So how can we start breaking down these questions into smaller questions where we can have teams of people tackling that one problem? Because we'll face 2 challenges. One, how do we organize this externally with refugees and organizations in Ukraine? But we also need to think, how do we organize it within our Slack community, because that's going to drive our efficiency. So going from here, question number 1, and who, from where, and when do we evacuate? So we need to basically we need to know who we are evacuating, how many people, any preconditions, and so on. There are people in wheelchairs who can't move easily. What do we do about them? There are people, there are a situation I've seen where children are on their own. How do we do that? Where do we pick them up? When do we pick them up? Into actionable next steps, what we can do here is that one suggestion, there can be alternatives. I think the 4 steps would be, let's create some sort of intake form, Google Forms or website where people can just submit an evacuation request with, excuse me, with as many details as possible so that we can rank and prioritize them. Second, even that form, once we have it up and running, we need to market it to people. Apologies for the business speak here. I don't really mean marketing, but we need to build awareness of it so that we don't leave people behind just because they didn't know that there was this option. So we need to make people aware of it. And this can be done either by reaching out to relevant telegrams or even partnering with newspapers, depending on how we want to do that. Of course, keep in the back of the mind, the question is, how do we not get disrupted by Russians? Also, we'll need tools how to visualize this data so that we can actually see this and make decisions in a quick way. And also the biggest thing that many of the country resources are leaving out of sight is that we need a process to keep this database up to date, to know who has already moved out on their own, et cetera, so that we are not wasting resources on the issues that were resolved. In terms of HR needs, I think that we would need a couple of developers for the task number A, and probably BAEs or developers for task number C. Tasks in terms of marketing effort and keeping the database up to date, they can be done with anyone with a general non-specific set of skills. We'll need lots of people on this front just because it's going to be labor intensive. Things that also come to mind, we'll need to partner with other institutions as well. So marketing efforts is a pretty broad term here. So I'll run through this whole list right now, and then we can probably start addressing point by point. I think, unless you guys have any other suggestions, feel free to, interrupt me. Second question: where do we bring these people? This question is, I think that this question is easier one to answer because there are lots of volunteers who are willing to offer their housing, in Poland, in Slovakia, in Romania, and so on. But we need to get people to the border first. So the question where this gets really difficult, in my opinion, is that people will most likely need to make stops on their way to the western border. Taking somebody from Kharkiv to western border is it's not going to be a one-day drive, especially with gas shortages or army on the way. So we need to think of incremental steps and sort of transit hubs for people, where people can just stop somewhere for a night in a city that is marginally safer than the one that they're leaving. So I think here the question is, again, to build a database of people who are willing to house refugees, or organizations or businesses, especially in Ukraine, so that we can use them as transit hubs on the way to the western border. A couple of developers, then marketing effort to just get on the phone, on the Telegram chats, Facebook groups, and get people to be aware of this form and contact us as much as possible. Also, visualizing our capacity so that we can drive decision making. Keeping the database up to date. The process to keep the database up to date is going to show up at every point here. It's going to be a bit of an arduous one. We might have to set up essentially what amounts to a call center to be able to check in on everybody in this database once per day, or at a certain frequency. Third big question, which route are we bringing them there? So I think right now, this is a huge question. My friends who tried to leave, it's extremely confusing to try to navigate the landscape with army advancing, bridges being blown up, and so on. In terms of steps, what I'm suggesting, we need a team to monitor the situation in a secure way, where the bridges, also not to communicate this info to the enemy. Also just try to monitor where is the Russian army, where is it safe, where is it not safe, at which point. Keep this map updated. Communication team to provide almost near real-time support to drivers who will be driving these people or trying to navigate. Question, how do we do it in a secure way? And of course, we can probably outreach to a whole bunch of partners. Google has turned off live traffic monitoring in Ukraine for the security purposes, but perhaps they could turn it on just for us. We can talk to them, maybe NASA or with their satellites or Ukrainian military. So we would need somebody to brainstorm and come up with these questions. Finally, the fourth and the nastiest question. who's going to bring people there and using what vehicles. Basically, unless anybody has other suggestions, there are two ways I can see. There can be volunteer drivers, and there can be paid drivers who can pay and organize this specifically. This is we're going to have lots of questions here, and we'll need to brainstorm it in greater detail. For starters, the first pass, again, we need a campaign to sign people up. We will need, of course, to vet them in one way or the other. Require them to submit passports or some sort of verification, GPS tracking, check-ins with our partners at different stops. Lots of questions, impossible to answer them all at once right now. So this is regarding the volunteer drivers. Second, can we organize the effort to actually pay people, take buses and drive people out of the cities that are being shot at? There should probably be some transport companies who would be willing to do that. We can pay them, they can volunteer to do that, but we can probably reach out to them because one way or the other, they'll need our support with planning the safe routes and also organizing who to pick up, or where, when, and so on. So I think these are the two streams that we can work on. Also, the HR requirements are here for starters. And of course, the question of finding gas, as you guys have mentioned, and also vetting people to ensure that nobody gets kidnapped and so on. I think another set of questions is what happens at the border. I'll just touch on it briefly because that's important. There are massive jams right now at the border. So one very easy low-hanging fruit that we can provide is just a monitor of which border crossing is the least busy so that we can navigate people there. Otherwise, I think we can stop here just due to the time constraints because other questions, I think they have secondary priority. Everything that I've outlined, this is the external strategy. We'll also need to think how we organize it internally, what sort of team we need. As a general proposition, I think we need to set up internally an HR team where that can start sourcing people who are going to do any of those tasks. In terms of organizational approaches, I think we can, for each of these tasks, we can designate from 1 to 3 points of contact who can monitor the progress 24/7, and then start recruiting more people who are going to actually do the footwork on each of these tasks and organize them accordingly. Other points, we'll need to think about raising funds and also trying to set up resources such as call center capabilities if we want to provide real-time support to drivers or anybody else. And potentially draw in more consultants from outside, anybody who has actually more experience in organizing these logistics. Having said that, I'll wrap it up. I think this would be the outline and the breakdown of tasks. And I'll open the floor to comments.
Hi, guys. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear it. Let's
Cool.
keep the questions at this stage as short as possible so we can move through the document, but go ahead.
Yeah, one question. So what is the easiest way? What is the biggest problem that we can solve right now?
Prioritization of the people and the areas that we can route this matchmaking and increasing the supply of transport. Those are two biggest things.
What are the main problems with the communication?
There is too much and no processes to prioritize and understand what we're focusing on. When there are 5 volunteers that used to manage these matchmaking and then we got 15,000 requests, they just they can't. And then there is only 500 people that were able to provide transport and timing. The individual transportees They're like, hey, I'm moving from Vinnytsia to Lviv in 2 hours. And if we miss that, that's it. So we need to be timely and also think about increasing the capacity that is more reliable and less time sensitive, meaning buses potentially.
To add to that point, hi, I'm Alistair. I think that if the funds are available to pay people, local people who can't leave, such as men who are drivers and transport companies, things like that, who couldn't leave anyway. And I know of some families in Moldova where I am now, where their husbands, fathers couldn't leave, and they're doing this now independently. They'll be more reliable if they're on payroll and they can be organized. I think if you're organizing with volunteers, especially locals who are in Ukraine and stuck in Ukraine, it's going to be difficult to rely on them very heavily.
Yeah, and I just want to re-emphasize, we're observing a moment in time when the money is not a problem. We have so much money, no ways to deploy it effectively.
I don't think that if the money is available, then I don't think that the labor will be difficult to necessarily get a hold of. As I said, I already know people who are doing this, looking for this as a job in Ukraine. So I don't think that should be an issue. One point I do want to make about the routes and everything is that if you're getting buses and bigger buses and stuff, it's not necessarily also easy people to get to a central location. I know a lot of people who have left the population hubs because they knew that those were like the most dangerous areas, and they've gone to villages on the outskirts of Kiev or Odessa, and now they're kind of stuck there because there's no transportation available for them in those villages.
And just to speak briefly about that, not to hijack the conversation, we are thinking about the bridge transportation. So not A to Z, but A to B to C to D to whatever. So thinking about logistics in that way.
Yeah.
Question, what about trains? Do they still drive?
Limited capacity, limited schedules.
Could we get more?
That's a very slow infrastructure.
From Poland?
Impossible.
Okay. And from Czech?
Anywhere outside Ukraine, impossible.
There should be an international railway, right?
There is, but it's also...
I'd be very surprised if any international operators will go into a war zone with a train, because any damage to the train line will be dead weight on the other side, and they won't be able to move it. And
it'll be uninsured,
and it'll be lose insurance, and they'll have gone outside of their remit and their roles. So, though in theory, yes, in practice, it's not going to happen
unless we can just get a train, buy it, and drive it. It won't happen.
I believe the rails are incompatible.
There is a transfer between Ukraine and Romania. You have to switch rails too.
No, I mean the scale. The wheels.
You have to consider the target you're creating. Trains are very easily targeted. The last thing you want to do is skyline something that's going to be carrying a large number of civilians in a war zone where the enemy is not targeting civilians, but they are. A train has a very big footprint because there's only one place it can go. It has to follow tracks. So there's
two sides to that coin, though. I mean, also people aren't putting like landmines on train tracks as they would be on roads, and they're not having to go through military checkpoints, all those sorts of things, and you can get a vast number of people out in a smaller footprint. So I think there's two sides to that.
And I just want to quickly introduce you to Katie, because I totally forgot to. She is ex-military veteran that has experience evacuating people from Afghanistan. So in terms of that aspect, we should listen to her in terms of that expertise.
Well, then let's change the question. What worked best in Afghanistan?
So, and that's the question that honestly, apples and oranges. I will say in this situation, and yeah, so just quick, yes, I am a former Marine. I was a Russian linguist, but I used it for good, not evil. I have been involved in the evacuations of Afghanistan since August. I did ground operations. I flew out about 12 planes with about 340 people each. The difference is you guys have you have a very different set of problems and a very different set of things that are working wildly in your favor. Just listening to this call, you're already more organized and thinking more clearly about what things need to be done than how it worked in Afghanistan. You have the very, very fortunate luxury of being surrounded by countries who are welcoming people at a large rate, where Afghanistan, nobody wanted them, nobody wanted to help the people. So where ground didn't work well in Afghanistan because of the checkpoints, because of the danger traveling over the ground, air isn't going to work well in the Ukraine. I honestly am not very familiar with the train systems in the Ukraine, but again, to me, that's a big target. And I know they're not putting landmines on train tracks, but there's really nothing saying they couldn't, especially if they start seeing a bunch of trains moving around the country. I think the plan to really solidify a good ground operation is the best bet, because again, you're surrounded on all 3.5 sides by countries who are willing to accept you. I think, Alistair, I believe it was, if you can get a solid list of people who are 100% willing to be employed drivers, what compensation they expect, what assets they can provide, what they have access to, that would be a really good thing to have with contact numbers. Things you have to keep in mind is when you start moving large amounts of money internationally, there's I'm going to bluff on the breakdown of the acronym, but OFAC, they're essentially the Office of Foreign Assets Control. They monitor all large-scale international transactions to make sure you're not funding terrorism or anything like that. So you have to be really on top of what you're sending money to and be able to justify it if it's ever raised in question. I don't really think that's a problem, but it's something that should be kept in the back of your mind. Something else that I believe should be kind of dug into is cooperation from official entities. From what Poland is issuing 3-year visas at the border to anyone that can cross. What other nations are issuing those kinds of allowances? What are the requirements? I know for the most part in EU, if you have a passport, you can travel freely temporarily. But really figuring out what country is offering what are their requirements as far as documentation goes, and who wants to go where. It's a big task. But then there's also, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling, you have to figure out who's actually emigrating and who just needs to get out of there temporarily to get out of danger. Because those people, if you can get them somewhere safe and they don't have to cross a border, maybe that might be in their best interest. So there's a lot to unpack in this, but you guys are already off to a way better start than Afghanistan was. I can assure you, that was a mess. It's still a mess.
I think we also want to finish in a better place. I want to suggest a few things. One is people like to know what they pay for. If we are able to show them you are paying for that drive, we might be able to raise funds for that more effectively. And the second one is we need organization. So we have few big tasks that you broke down. We have in those, we have few smaller tasks like data visualization, like organizing the data. So we need to have someone that is in charge of the whole task of evacuation. We need to have someone who is in charge of those big tasks, and we need each task force to have someone who is in charge and knows what their team is doing. I think that by that we can organize and collaborate much more effectively.
I already saw some stuff in the group earlier today about the routes. How good are the routes? How long do we expect travel times to be from, for example, point A to point B? Do we have some kind of data on that?
Highly specific question, and we need a person that just lives every day with this information and can be our point of contact for any query at any given time.
that they're changing a lot from well as what I see of people moving over the past week. Some people it's taken them 30 hours from Kiev. Some people it took them a lot less. So it's really specific, it seems, depending on what routes people take, how lucky they are when they get to fuel stops and stuff.
Sorry, I think we have an update on that though. Don't we have an external company that's helping us keep track of this? What is it called? It's in the combined Ukraine support Slack channel. I think the organization is, I forgot what it's called, but
there are multiple data sources. Our job is, again, not to duplicate any effort, but to have a coordinator that is able to assess that information and provide us the answers to the queries at any given time. So honestly, we just assume that the data is somewhere, and we assume that we have a point of contact that is redundant, meaning that we have it covered on all time zones, ideally 3 people. But I'm just assuming that that's one point, that the black box that just gives us an answer. Is it safe to go from A to B in this time frame? And they just tell us the risk level. That's it. All right, I would propose for Stepan to proceed. We're hitting the limit on time, and I would like to cover the rest of the document if possible, because that way you all can go back after this call and propose more questions with food for thought. Stepan, can you proceed? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. One point to address all our discussions I want to make very clearly is that one big thing, and it's creating lots of questions, and we cannot really answer them. But I want to stress one thing is that right now we, as a UkraineNow organization, as volunteers, we don't really know much. I would say that we know almost nothing, and it's not to shit on us or you guys, but it's just stating a fact that we don't know the travel times. We don't know the situation with trains. We don't know the routes. So everything that I think 75–80% of the questions that you guys voiced, the answer is we don't know. And I think the first step would be for us to basically go out and find this information so that we can start making proper decisions. So as an actionable next steps, what I would suggest, and you guys feel free to chime in, but as immediate stuff that we need to solve out literally today to be able to make progress, I think we need to organize teams, split down the tasks. And I think we can use the document as a first pass, and you guys can give more ideas, but we need to split down the tasks into something manageable, as I believe Amitai mentioned. And then we need to assign people to them who are going to monitor it, and assign people who are going to provide support on it. It can be very simple. So we don't need to invent a wheel on many of these things. Some of these things can be as simple as just creating a list of partner organizations, calling them and asking, hey guys, do you have any info on this and that? And they can give us information, and asking them how can we support them, and basically proceeding with that. And once we have a little bit more information on the situation on the ground, I think we can start prioritizing better, because we can't even prioritize right now if we don't know how many people need to be evacuated from Kiev versus Dnipro or Zaporizhia, or how the routes look like, or how many volunteers are there. So we're going in blind right now, and I think our first priority should be to increase clarity to be able to do what we're gonna do next.
I have one thought about that is maybe it won't ever end if we will try to gather enough information in order to operate. And I think we fix me if you think otherwise, but maybe a better strategy will be to operate and then to prioritize, acting when we assume that each emergency that we can recognize and we can help is important enough to help them.
I actually agree with that. Trying to prioritize people, and I'm strictly speaking from Afghanistan, created more of a problem than, as I'm sorry, I can't see your name right now. as he said, than just treating. If you look at it from like a 911, an emergency medical situation, you kind of treat everyone as an emergency. If they're telling you they need to be evacuated, then you have to treat them like they need to be evacuated. If you try to do this hierarchy, which is what they started doing in Afghanistan, well, this guy was this important and he was connected to this general, so he really needs to go. Well, you can't tell me his life is any more valuable than this woman who has no connections to anyone important, but just really unsafe. I think the only thing maybe in terms of prioritizing, and it might just be a choice of wording, is who's accessible versus who's not accessible. But if somebody asks for evacuation, you just have to assume that they need to be evacuated.
I agree. So I think that Amitai, to follow up on your point, I think we need to do both things at the same time. We need all of the tasks that were outlined in the doc. I think if we can coordinate effectively, I believe we have human resources and also financial resources if needed to start digging into each of these directions at the same time. So in terms of prioritization of people, I think I'll agree with Katie. Personally, I'll have an agnostic approach in the sense that I won't build any expectations and we'll just need to go out there and see what works first and foremost. But in terms of us as a team going forward and doing something, I think we can split down the tasks the way how they were mentioned and assign people to them and start executing on every single front at the same time. And as you saw, tasks include both gathering information to be able to prioritize, but also executing and figuring out what needs to be done. So my suggestion is do everything that's in this list, to go out and do it simultaneously starting right now. The question is, what do we need as a team in terms of organizational resources to make that happen?
The most prominent thing I recognize that we need is to know where do we have evacuation people who can evacuate. This is most important resource. If we know that someone is able to get a car from that point to that point, and we know that this point leads to this point and this point leads to a border, we have an evacuation plan. So the most important thing we need to identify is where can we get people from and to where?
From the organizational standpoint, let me, if you don't mind, let me push back a little bit on it. So if you go into the general Slack channel in our team, we have 1,000 people there. So of course, not everybody will be able to contribute full time, but I think we can have 20, 30, 50 people doing what you said and identifying these opportunities, and have another team doing some other tasks, which we'll need to do. I think we need to think of all these tasks at the same time, since we do have human resources to cover them all at the same time. Of course, keeping in mind what you said as a priority, which I agree. But I think we need to think a little bit about organizational approach of us as a team. How are we handling these things? Because we have lots of resources, human resources, people willing to help. We just need to organize them. That's the priority. I hope that makes sense to you guys.
May I suggest that we seriously consider swapping over to Airtable? The reason why is that we can create different views and directly port them into tables, even with custom forms. So you could even create one base. It removes the technical aspect for anyone who doesn't have experience in terms of MongoDB, etc. Anyone could go in and edit.
Hey guys, and I'm sorry, I don't see your name, but let's assume that we'll handle technology. That is not a problem. Airtable, whatever it is, we'll handle that.
Just to give you a little bit, I know we're going over time now, but to give a little bit of an illustration, guys, I think we need to start thinking about ourselves as a formal organization. I think, you know, I don't know, Microsoft or Department of Defense or whatever. And because I can see that if we were to right now to proceed with this task straight here, which, you know, we don't have to, but, you know, one thing that we need to think is we need people who are managing our HR, basically. We are basically a list of volunteers, sorting them by skills, reaching out to people and figuring out who can do what, so that we can assign them to tasks. Second, we'll need a team internally to handle all our, you know, administrative stuff, such as things, and, you know, tech support. Artur mentioned to me that he got hacked, almost got hacked many times yesterday. We need a, you know, some sort of cybersecurity team to handle that. We will need basically to also set up, you know, some a team who's going to be taking care of fundraising and so on. So I'd encourage you guys to start thinking not only about what can we do for refugees right now, but what can we do right now to organize our efficient work as a team, because honestly, I think this is the biggest, you know, this is a big challenge for us. And if we can't organize our work internally effectively, we're definitely not going to do anything effective externally.
Can I ask real quick, would anyone in this theater, in this arena, have an issue signing a non-disclosure agreement to be a part of, you know, this operation? You don't have to answer me, like I certainly don't expect you to answer me, but think that through. If that's something that you would have an issue with, I do believe that is going to be asked of each and every one of us, just to keep things legal and above board.
I fully agree.
With,
I've generated a template already. It's just a matter of us adding it to the website form. And again, that's online generated NDA. So eventually, you know, a couple of days from now, we'll have to have legal support to look through that and just be specific, but we have the basic.
I've already seen a couple of people coming in with legal experience, so if we can get them to oversight legal related things, will be helpful.
I'm an attorney. I'm happy to review or take care of any of those tests.
Great. DM me please on Slack. Too many messages, but I'll get to you.
Or get me, because I'm a little easier to get, because Artur gets everything.
Perfect.
Just so everyone knows, just so everyone knows, I'm also one of the Slack admins. Artur, Daniel, and I were very integral in the whole Corona Y movement we did, like in the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm quite comfortable with this chaos. I just don't have as much time right now. It's a skill to get used to the insanity of an organization that grows 1,000 people a day, but it's something you just learn how to just move through.
Yeah, we were fortunate to build some frameworks and some tricks to manage this process, and that's why we.
Yeah, I'm gonna start stealing stuff from CoronaWise Slack and start stealing some of the ideas and some of the things we've used and tried before.
Yeah, once we have more time, we'll share that organizational knowledge. But for now, let's focus on Stepan wrapping up the call, please. Thank you.
Yes, we should wrap it up. Guys, I want to push one thing very clearly as to what we need to do next is I think we need to sit down and assign roles. They can be informal and temporary to what is doing what, to which tasks, and what needs to be done. And basically get people to the point where they can go ahead and start executing those tasks. I think that should be the main outcome from today, so that we split these tasks, assign them to people, and get the ball rolling, whether it's on the evacuation front or more an internal management approach. So because without it, you know, we're not going to move forward. I really dislike collective responsibility. So I think we need to clearly define roles and assign people to them. That should be the main outcome of this meeting, I would suggest.
In that vein, is there any way we can get a live document or some kind of editable document for all of the people who are interested in participating, so that we can have a list of everyone and their experience. Hey, my name is this, I'm a lawyer, I have data entry, I have XYZ,
Yes,
so that when we create these tasks,
we'll be done.
We can sort through that.
Will be shared securely with people on this I1 evacuation private channel. Please do not share that document outside of the group.
Arthur, may I suggest that since Slack is the main place where we have people and manage people, we need to reorganize it to support small groups and small units working on different tasks. I know it's a time-demanding task, but I think it's a very important one since a lot of people find their way going to Slack, not knowing what to do, and then dropping off. And I think we can have more people more engaged if we will support small groups working on very clearly defined tasks.
Exactly. That's why the thing that I sent you is crucial. The active and the passive routing that we documented during the CoronaWhy experience. If you can visualize that and help us spread that knowledge to organize channels better, that'd be great. And sorry for interrupting all of you. Stepan, please wrap it up.
Okay. To wrap it up, I think, apologies, I'll have to rely on your help here, Arthur. But we need basically to have some sort of to clarify immediate internal needs in the senses, set up an HR department who's going to onboard people and split them into groups, as Amitai suggested. And other tasks. So I think we need to basically have another conversation right now who can take care of certain internal directions, like handling, people, moving people to an efficient communication channels, splitting, handling specific external tasks.
Perfect. I think that's the best thing for us to wrap up this call with. I think the next point of us syncing should be actually reviewing that spreadsheet privately without the recording and designating specific things towards it. So we'll be reaching out to, well, let's think about it. I'll send a link with the spreadsheet in the private channel with a structure, and just start filling out yourself if you're willing to commit at least to a couple of hours per day to this. And once we're done with it, let's call it 3-4 hours, again, depending on time zones, whenever people get to it, let's review it and step in. We can sync on the high level ideation of basic things to offer to these individuals to confirm availability, willingness, and basically the presence of the skills to match. We are treating this first initiative of evacuation as the small sandbox environment to prototype these frameworks and then show it and replicate for other initiatives. We won't be able to tackle this on organizational level. Let's just forget about that. That's impossible given the scale of having 1,300 of people already, and more will come. Let's just focus on evacuation first, establish the processes, create the framework, help people, and hopefully replicate it to other initiatives that are also time sensitive. All right, sounds good. Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna wrap it up. Please feel free to ask questions in the channel. Again, I don't think we shared anything sensitive during the call. I'll upload the call and share the link. Feel free to share it with anyone that you feel will be helpful to contribute to this. Our next step is combining a roster for this team, and then synchronizing next on assigning specific tasks. Thanks, everyone. Again, thank you so much for being here. Personally, from my family, from my country, it really means a lot. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, take care.